Young nigga colorblind blue, that's all I see. Hand them boys down, got some diamonds, smiley on me. I let her ride shit down and plus I got.
So I think Atlanta and I think the Panthers, I think those two games are the most important games throughout the year because I think those are the ones that decides who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. Because I think the Saints are the best team in this division, but I think the Falcons and the Panthers are a close second. But I don't think there's enough spots with teams like the Cowboys, teams like the Vikings, teams like the Packers. I don't think there's spots to really think that three teams out of the same division is gonna make it. You play these teams too much, your records are gonna be too dwindled by the end of the year. Other teams are gonna have a one game better than you, tiebreaker over you. So the Falcons are another one of these teams. They're one of the better teams in the league. They're not rebuilding. They're not. They don't have a lot of questions. So it's just kind of like. They play, when you think about last year, they played the Eagles. They lost a close game to the Eagles. They could have very well been in a divisional or the championship game last year. They beat the Rams, a team that teams really had trouble with. So, looking at the Falcons, this is one of those teams that's pretty good. They're right where they need to be. Now, let's talk about their roster a little bit. Matt Ryan, Matty Ice, he's one of those guys that he's good at sometimes. Sometimes you're disappointed with him, but it's like it's Matty Ice. It's like he's better than half the league, but was he a first overall pick? It's like no. Okay, but we're not going to talk about that. It's just like Matt Ryan. We know what we're getting out of him. He's a good quarterback. He can manage the game pretty well. Pretty good slinger. Whatever. Really good running backs here. You got fucking Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman. Pretty good running back combination there. Wide receiver, Julio Jones, one of the best guys in the league. Mohamed Sanu. I think Mohamed Sanu is the best wide receiver in the game. This is what I'm talking about. Most wide receivers aren't as big as Mohamed Sanu. Sanu is big like Julio Jones. He's physical like Julio Jones, but he's fast enough to run the Y slot or the Y type options at the wide receiver position. That's stuff like over the middle. That's kind of routes to get Julio involved. And the thing is that I like about Mohamed Sanu is Julio gets so covered so often that it opens up Sanu, and Sanu takes advantage of stuff like that. So I think someone like Calvin Ridley is going to have a good year this year. I think Calvin Ridley is going to come onto the scene. I think if I was drafting fantasy-wise, I'd stay away from Julio Jones this year, and I'd go after Calvin Ridley late, and I'd go after Mohamed Sanu in the mid-rounds because I think those guys are going to catch more touchdown-type passes. I think Julio is going to get really covered in the red zone. I think he only caught like 1 or 2 touchdowns in the red zone last year compared to the other top-notch guys. That's not good. So I think, you should Sanu and Ridley are going to be good fantasy options. I stay away from Julio Jones. Julio Jones is going to be a good player, don't get me wrong. He's going to probably be a top 10 wide receiver. But when you draft a top 10 wide receiver, you kind of draft him in the position that he could be the best guy that year. So when you draft the top guy and he's the 10th guy, that's really not what you wanted. So then offensive line, they've had a good offensive line. Jake Matthews, Alex Mack, Brandon Fusco, a really good offensive line. This is a good offensive line. A couple other guys on the offensive line as well. Defensively, Tack McKinley. This kid had a pretty good year as a rookie last year. Vic Beasley's coming into his own. Now on the defensive line, I don't like that they lost Adrian Claiborne and Dontari Poe. I thought, that interior line was really good with those guys anchoring in it, and those guys are now gone. Grady Jarrett showed promise 2 years ago in that Super Bowl. He's slated as like one of the starter guys. Jack Crawford's here. Brooks Reed. There's some good players on the defensive line. Don't get me wrong, but I don't like the players that they lost. I thought they should have tried to retain those guys. Now those guys are gone. Taylor Gabriel's gone as well as another guy. Andre Roberts is gone. A tight end, Courtney Upshaw, a defensive tackle, is gone as well. Linebackers, Deion Jones, one of the better linebackers in the league. Duke Riley out of LSU showed promise last year. I like what I saw out of him. And Devontae Campbell has been pretty good for them as well. Then in secondary-wise, Desmond Trufant, pretty good. Robert Alford, pretty good. Ricardo Allen, Keanu Neal had a good year last year or 2 years ago. Well, he had a good year last year, but a good draft pick a couple years ago. They got him out of Florida. pretty good defense, good secondary. I think this defense can hold its own. I think this offense is good enough to have them win games. The one thing that I've always realized with the Falcons, as long as they can get through about 3 quarters and the game's pretty close, Matt Ryan can figure it out. Matt Ryan can lead his team down the field that one more time. And that's the thing about the NFL. There's really not that fact that there's that many. Like, the teams are pretty close together, talent-wise. It's just, who can get it done in those fourth quarter situations, who can get it done in the crunch time, and that's really what makes, which team's better than others. Because when you think about it, a lot of these records are very similar. So I think the Falcons have a good year. I don't think they're as good as the Saints, and I think they're at the same par with the Panthers. So I think whoever wins those games between the Falcons and the Panthers throughout the year, whoever can beat the Bucs, if the Bucs are playing good, playing like giving teams hell. If the Bucs are giving teams hell, if you can win those games against the Bucs, I think those are the games. And how you play against the Saints, I think those games are going to really depend and really matter on which one of these teams between the Panthers and the Falcons get that second, get that wild card spot, because I think two of these teams are competing for it. And so, we'll see what happens. Let's see. Let me see if I had any team needs for the Falcons. Slot receiver. A slot receiver, they added Calvin Ridley. I don't really think Calvin Ridley's going to play slot, but he could. They have Justin Hardy who can play slot as well. A reliable tight end. Austin Hooper is kind of who they're going with. It's not really like a reliable tight end, but he's not a bad tight end. Depth on the O-line. They didn't really add Brandon Fusco they did add. So, but they didn't really add depth, but that's fine. They've got a good offensive line. It's kind of hard to have depth in the league. They've got some good – and then address the defensive line, free agency, which they didn't do very well. They lost Courtney Upshaw. They lost Adrian Claiborne and Dontari Poe. So their defensive line is not – I don't think their defensive line is going to be as strong as it was in the past. But I think, they have Tack McKinley, Grady Jarrett, and they drafted Sinnett from Florida State or South Florida. A couple other guys they drafted. Isaiah Oliver from Colorado. I really like him as a cornerback. I think he could make an impact this year at the slot cornerback. Ito Smith, a really good little slot running back that I like. I think he can make an impact. They just have a crowded backfield. Russell Gage, I'm not real high on Russell Gage out of LSU. So I think the Falcons, Falcons won 10 games last year, won 11 the year before, made the Super Bowl. We'll see where this team goes next. We'll see if this team continues to, trend down, or, is this team going to, get back to where it was at, where it was at 2 years ago. So, but I think they had a, all right draft, good players. Calvin Ridley was a good add. I think that's the one thing about the Falcons, what does Calvin Ridley add to this team, I think, is the big thing, because he's the real guy that's really going to be coming in as a starter. Most of the other guys have already been starting on this team. How much of an X factor is Calvin Ridley going to be for the Falcons? Can he open up Julio Jones? Can he get open? Can he be a big play wide receiver where you can't double Julio anymore because there's too much talent out there on the field? I think that's going to be the big key for the Falcons and their success. Definitely depends on, can their defense and their defensive line hold up the end of the bargain that it's been holding up for them the last couple of years.
I can hear the Perkins calling. I can hear the purple calling. I can hear the Xannies calling. I can hear them Perks calling.